And we're starting to have very spontaneous experiences of understanding we have lived other lifetimes, or we are multidimensional in our nature. And so, as we each go through our own story of that, it's going to be very, very tailored to our Akashic lineage. And so, if I've been a monk before, or I've been, in an ashram in India, if I've been a Buddhist teacher, if I've been a physician in Europe, if I've been a writer, if I've been whatever in other lifetimes, there'll start to be a bleed in of energy and information from the knowledge, the experience, the content of those incarnations.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I'm your humble servant and seafood, Taoist Master San Qing, and it is another day in paradise. It's good to be me. I have the great pleasure of sharing time with this incredible being, Dr. John Ryan, who is a master of many things, but let's just keep it to just basically the conscious awakening of the individual that is being shared in these wisdom teachings. Welcome to the podcast, my dear friend.
Thank you, son. It's a true delight to be here. And a big hello to all the listening audience, too. It's really a great joy.
And so, without any further ado, why don't we just create a summary or an abbreviated sort of like version of your journey to this point?
Sure. So I'll go back a little bit in time, San, just to kind of set the scene, I guess. I'm a physician by training, so I'm a medical doctor in the Western tradition. I'm a professor of medicine and teach diagnostic imaging, so working with MRI and CT scanning and all the internal visualization that comes from those kinds of technologies. But during my evolution in medicine, just at the end of medical school, I started to develop a disgruntledness, a sense of I'm missing something. I know that this training is interesting, it's fascinating, there's an incredible body of work and research and love and dedication that's gone into it by millions of people over time. And it brought us to a point of an incredible understanding of science and the human body in many ways. But I felt it was void of something that was in me, and I needed to find it. And so that kind of prompted a whole series of experiences. It was kind of like a setup because I didn't realize that was happening at the time. And so as I went on, what happened for me was I began to have a spontaneous Kundalini kind of an awakening. And so I'd go to bed at night and my body would start to vibrate, and I'd be in bed and I couldn't lie still, and I would pop out of my body and start to have out-of-body experiences and conscious astral travel and all those kinds of things. And this was new to me. I had no history of knowing these kinds of things were possible, at least in this incarnation. And I was going through this without any guide. I didn't really have any connection with an Eastern spiritual system that understands these things so much better. And so it was a time when there were not a lot of books and not a lot of information available to us. And synchronicities started to occur, and intuitions, really strong intuitions, started to develop that became a guide, like a lamppost for me. And so what happened was I was led to a bookstore one day, and I woke up in the morning and there was this like haunting intuition. It just wouldn't let me go. It kept saying, go to this bookstore, go to this bookstore. And it was a bookstore that I had never been to or knew much about. I knew it was a holistic kind of a bookstore, but I had never been in there. So off I went, and before you know it, I'm walking around this place. It was like an old house, a mansion kind of style, like a puzzle of rooms. And I was going from room to room, and they had different kinds of, information in different rooms, mostly about yoga and, Eastern systems of healing and all this kind of stuff. And out of the blue, there was a book on the shelf that started to glow as if it was full of light. And I'm looking at this thinking, good heavens, what's happening? And so I went over to the book and I took it off the shelf. And the book was The Spontaneous Awakening of Kundalini by Gopi Krishna. And so I look at it and I start to read the back cover and the insert, and I realized this is kind of what I'm experiencing. Like I it wasn't exactly the same format, but there were so many details about it that were identical to what I was living myself. And so it opened a whole portal for me, like a whole new dimension of understanding that, of course, began a search and investigation. And I started to learn about these things. I started to learn about, Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine and energy medicine and the chakra system and all the things that are so now commonly known and understood. But I don't know how I would have found it unless I was really prompted in the way that I was. And so I learned a lot from that experience. So, first of all, there's a consciousness that we are each as a human being that is transcendent to the body. We can live inside or outside this physical body. There's a whole world of knowledge and information that's foreign to the Western mind, but very powerful in its content and information, and that it's available to us now because of all the resources we have. And especially in modern day with, the internet and Google at your fingertips, you can kind of learn anything you want to learn or know about. And so as I went through this process, I kind of went through a reprocessing of myself. It brought me to realize there's so much more to life and to reality and the nature of reality. And so I began to explore healing outside of the traditional Western, opportunities, shall we say, the things that exist for us in our dimension or our civilization. And started to work with energy healing, and I had taken Reiki courses and done various things like that to begin to explore what that's all about. And as my own evolution went on, I began having internal experiences. I would begin to receive visions, and I would see things in my mind's eye that were teaching me information. And so as time unfolded, I was shown a whole structure of energy that I refer to in my work as the 24th chromosome. It's this energetic bridge, if you will, that exists between us in our body and where we exist as in a higher dimensional plane of reality. We use the terms higher self or I am presence, these kinds of things to convey that. And that this quantum aspect of reality contains a bridge between the body and the soul. It's kind of like how we connect, if you will, to spirit. And within this realm, there's a whole field of information that has record of everything we've ever lived, ever done, what we would consider our Akashic record, or perhaps, other incarnations, other lifetimes. All of that information is coded into this structure. And it comes with us each time we arrive on the earth to have an incarnation. So the other thing that began to happen for me was I started to have memories of around the time when I was born, and that I was being told at the time there are two possible futures for the planet. And of course, that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me at the beginning. It does now. I'll explain a little bit. But when I was born in 1964. So when I was born, I remember having an experience when I was 7 years old. I was with a friend of mine and her mother, and we were looking at a book called The Encyclopedia of the Future. And it was a fascinating book. It kind of was like the Jetsons, it was like these cities where people lived in bubbles and traveled in spaceships and all that kind of stuff. And my friend's mother just turned to me and asked me this really profound question to ask a child. She said, "John, what do you think the future will bring?" And I kind of stopped for a minute, and this energy descended upon me, Sam. It was like this bigger part of me, like an amplitude of my soul, just kind of descended right into my little tiny 7-year-old body. And I stood up like I was the emperor, and I said, "There are two possible futures for this planet. And I will know if we are all living in 1998 that we have chosen the good one." So she looked at me and I thought, okay, so that kind of descended, the energy dissipated, and I had forgotten about that for a very long time until I started going through this Kundalini process. And I remembered that in the back of my mind, in a subconscious place, there was an awareness that the earth may go through what we are terming today the ascension, this process of a rapid spiritual awakening and integration to bring humanity forward in consciousness and understanding, and ultimately to develop what we would call an ascended civilization. And so this was just an earmark in time. And so 1987, some people reference that year as a time of the harmonic convergence. And really, if you look in a lot of cultures like the Mayan cultures and the indigenous cultures, they have earmarked this point in time as very, very important. And we can think of that time, 1987, almost as a measurement. It's like a time where Spirit would say, is humanity evolved to a level of consciousness that's high enough in order to support this rapid integration of energy and consciousness that will be forthcoming if it chooses this path. And so humanity had to be prepared to a certain level. Now, I translate that in terms that are so much easier to understand. Is there enough love present on the planet for humanity to be able to undergo a rapid transformation of consciousness? And so, because when we speak in spiritual terms, it's really not about science and energy and technology. It's about love. Is this civilization living in a love state? Is it living in a state of grace? And so there's an evolution of that within us as individuals, but also within the collective, if we think about ourselves as one family. And so in 1987, the outcome of that measurement was that humanity was indeed ready. Now, it might have been 50.1% ready instead of like 75% evolved, because there's still a lot of, light dark struggle that exists on the planet, obvious to all of us. But the measurement was high enough that humanity could sustain this rapid integration. Now, that kicked into gear a whole series of events. And the first was the Earth herself was prepared to develop a new kind of an energetic potential or profile. So the electromagnetic grid of the planet was adjusted through the period of 87 to about 2012. And we can think of the electromagnetic grid on the planet kind of as the magnetic holding force. It's what holds everything into reality and sustains the flow of energy in that reality. And so that had to be amped up quite a bit, or go through a system upgrade quite a bit in order to sustain the kind of energy that would be coming in future times. And so that was a foundational step. And 2012 marked a point in time that, it's been earmarked by, again, all these indigenous cultures. It was known as, December 21st, 2012, the end times prophecies and all these kinds of things that came into collective consciousness at that time. It was understood that that represents a very big shift in societal consciousness. We're going to begin something very, very new. Now, we think of that as the end times before that point, because of course there's a lot of drama and good movies to make and all that kind of stuff around that thinking. But in the end, what it really represents is a shift of consciousness. So the end of a period of time and the beginning of a new period of time. Because all endings in life have beginnings. There's always another side to the story of an ending. And so we entered in 2012 crossed the very threshold of a very long period of time that humanity will go through, where we are on an ascent of consciousness. And so it's a little frustrating at times for us, because of course we think we want to make it all better right away, yesterday, but we have to be a little bit patient with the process, because it's an unfoldment and an evolution. And in addition to those energetic changes, there are components of the earth that were developed. Now, this is a little metaphysical and a bit out there for people maybe not familiar with the information, but really what started to happen on the earth was the development of a crystalline grid, or a whole new structure of energy and life that will support us awakening into this new paradigm. Because everything that exists in the physical world has an internal blueprint. Like our body has an etheric body, and we have emotional and mental attributes of ourselves and causal bodies and all these kinds of things. The earth too has planes or dimensions of energetic reality. And so if something different is going to appear in physical form, there's going to be a reordering of energetic structure behind the scenes to develop that potential. And things happen first in energy, as you know very well in your work and in all your experience. They happen first in energy before they ever happen in form. And so this is all about developing the internal energy for what will eventually begin to outpicture as human life on the planet, or humanity. And so the last number of years, there's been an incredible force of awakening. Now, that's triggered its own series of interesting events because we can think of it in terms of awakening light. There's more light coming into the structure, there's more consciousness coming into the structure. But we live in a duality structure. So when we're existing in a certain frame of reference and all this light tries to pulse up through the creation and through the structure, the first thing it runs into is interference. The interference of the solidity of nature, the interference of held ideas and fixed beliefs and, system order that we've created to live in the old consciousness paradigm. And so this energy pushes us as a collective to break down these patterns. And there's a resistance within us if we don't want those patterns to break down. So, for example, if a human is really invested in the old paradigm, perhaps you're an oligarch and you have everything you want in that world, and you think, I don't want this world to change, you'd be resistant to that flow of energy and information. But if you are aligned with the new in your thinking or understanding, you want the world to move forward. You want this consciousness to instill itself because it's going to bring everything to a whole better plane of reality, to a whole different kind of an experiential reality that serves everybody. And so there's a resistance to the flow of that energy for that reason. But at the same time, the energy is so powerful and it's time stamped. It has to happen. So because it has to happen, no matter how much resistance there is, all that's going to do is create chaos and confusion in the process. But it's not going to deter the process. The process will continue regardless of what's happening in the world. And so the energy is very strong, very palpable, very capable of destroying things, very capable of rebalancing things, very capable of reordering things and building new things. We can think of it as the Divine Mother, in that context. And so this energy is streaming forth into the earth and has its own destiny. It has its own plan of action, if you will. And this is really what it's up to. But we're kind of now going along for the ride. And if we have that bigger understanding, it helps us in the moment. It takes away a lot of the tendency to fear and confusion and disorder and negativity, all the things that come up when we're faced with the drama of that kind of change. So now what happened for me in my own work during this process was I was shown energetic things about the nature of human being that are a little bit outside the norm of even common energetic principles. So for example, yes, we have chakras. Yes, we have meridians in our body. Yes, we have different levels and layers of energy in our body, like the etheric body, the emotional and mental body, the causal body, etc. But these are bodies of energy that help bring us into form. So they're like a blueprint or a template of energy. But all of those bodies have a celestial connection or a divine connection. We are connected to higher realms of spiritual reality, what we might term our own higher self, our I am presence, our soul, however we want to conceptualize it. All of it is fine. There's no right or wrong in terms of that understanding. But the mechanism by which we do that is through a structure that looks like this massive quantum DNA molecule. And so this came to me in a vision where I was shown this structure and how within it there are memories that are coded. It's like this kind of quantum energetic field is the template for life. And so we can relate to that now as humans because we understand we have genes. We have our 23 pairs of chromosomes, and these genes control so many things about the function in our body. But there's even a gene at another level of reality, a quantum level of reality that overlights all of that. And so at least this is how the information was shown to me or presented to me in this vision. And so what was explained is that as humans live through this time, there's a large swath of humanity that are going to undergo their own personal awakening experience. And this is the reason I started to live the things I did back in 1987. It was kind of like pre-programmed. It was like a soul choice that was made before I was even born. And so I always, people say, well, what do you need to do to spiritually awaken? What did you do? Did you pray? Did you go to church? Did you do? And I said, no, I went to school. I was minding my own business. I had no interest in any of it. And all of a sudden I was shaken awake. It started to happen in a very spontaneous way because it was meant to be that. There was like a soul contract, if you will, or a soul agreement to kind of go through that process as part of this bigger process that we're talking about. And so, and I know many, 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 many people, yourself included, can relate to that. It's you start go through these experiences where things happen, you're shown, you're introduced, you have energetic experiences, you have consciousness experiences, and something really profound begins to shake us or stir us or begin to stimulate an interest or an interrogation about the possibility of these kinds of things. And this, of course, leads to the experiences that propagate the journey, what we call the spiritual journey. And so as this unfolded for me, what it was explained was as humans go through this awakening, many people are going to be triggered into this kind of an awakening, whether they were planning for it or not. And it's going to be important to have an understanding of that process and then be able to know how to navigate the process and understand some of the things that happen to us all along the way as that happens. And so spirit, began to introduce me to the concept of working in this 24th chromosome. Because what was explained was when we were born in the old energy system, so say pre-2012, into this old pattern of energy, which was really dense in duality, is we would be born and we would be very veiled from understanding our origin, our soul's nature, the other lifetimes we had lived, the other influences on our consciousness that may be streaming through us, all these things. We were born and we were really, the filter was really, really, really dense and thick so that all we thought ourselves to be was this little tiny human being. And so as we go through this awakening, a lot of those veils are being effaced. And we're starting to have very spontaneous experiences of understanding we have lived other lifetimes or we are multidimensional in our nature. And so as we each go through our own story of that, it's going to be very, very tailored to our Akashic lineage. And so, if I've been a monk before, or I've been, in an ashram in India, if I've been a Buddhist teacher, if I've been a physician in Europe, if I've been a writer, if I've been whatever in other lifetimes, there'll start to be a bleed in of energy and information from the knowledge, the experience, the content of those incarnations. And people will begin sometimes having a spontaneous awareness of those lifetimes. And lots and lots and lots of people today can tell you they've had other lifetimes. They've had visions of other incarnations, or, they understand that they've, had 1,000 lifetimes on the earth, and they've been here since the time of Lemuria, and they've lived in Atlantis, and they've lived in Europe, and so on and so forth. And so I always joke when I'm giving seminars and teachings, I'll say to people, let's set ourselves in 1952. And let's imagine we're in this room having this conversation. And I ask you, how many people here believe in reincarnation and think they've lived another lifetime? And what would have happened was this big hook would have come, pulled me out of the room, locked me into a psychiatric facility, and said, this man's crazy. But in the same room, I said, okay, we're now in 2024. How many people have conscious awareness of at least one other lifetime that they've lived? And about 75% of the people in the room raise their hands. And so it's just a testament to the reality of this transformation. It's just a point of reference to say, oh my gosh, yeah, this, as esoteric as it all sounds, is incredibly real. And people are definitely having these kinds of experiences. And so, but what we live in our journey is, as energetically we're opening to this realm, if you will, or to this space, we start to have more awareness, both conscious and subconscious, of that energy and information. So people go through these incredible life transformations. They start to feel, how many people will say, I was living my life and all of a sudden nothing fit. I hated my job. I felt like I didn't know who my friends were anymore. I felt like nothing pleased me. I felt so dissatisfied, even though I had climbed the corporate ladder of success or done this or done that. And all of a sudden it became hollow and meaningless. And it seems like a bad thing. But when you start to take a step back, you realize the incredible blessing that's contained in that seed of experience. Because really what it represents is an awakening, a spiritual awakening process. And so it's not that we have to throw everything away that we know to be our reality or walk away from friends or relationships. We have to understand what we're living is a personal transformation. And if we tune into that, we can reorder the outside in whatever way it might need to change or not change. But we're attuned to the process instead of reacting, to the emotions and to the mental experiences of what we go through. And so you can do it with a lot more deliberation and wisdom and peace and understanding. And so as we're stimulated to awaken, we go through our own layers of energy and we will start to want to transform things and we'll become interested in things we weren't interested in before. All of a sudden you find yourself reading a book about the human energy system or Taoism or Buddhism or something that was very foreign to you up until that point in time. And the soul in each one of us is an incredible guide in that process. So if we learn to listen in an interior way, it will lead us really precisely in a way that's more precise than any book or other person can convey to us, because it's going to be super highly tailored from the guidance of our own soul. It's going to say, you read this book. It's not a book anybody else might need to read, but it's going to tell you to read that book because it's tailored for where you are in your journey. Or it will give you intuitions to do things or participate in something or attend a workshop or speak to a person or what have you. It might be to get up and get on the train early today instead of the one you might take into the city. And while you're sitting on the train, you end up having this incredible encounter with another being that you only met by listening to your intuition to be in the right place at the right time. And so there's this beautiful compass. It's this living, dynamic compass of guidance that starts to take over and show us what to do in a very personal way. And it creates a pathway that we get to walk. As long as we're listening and following through, on the guidance it's giving, it puts us on a path. And the path begins to unfold the perfection of the journey for each one of us. It takes us to exactly the right place, the right time, the right encounter, the right information, the right whatever, in order to be at the next doorway on our path. That's still a journey. It's a never-ending journey. It'll keep on going, but it will evolve us. And as we go through this, we undergo our own awakening and transformation. And so when you see again the bigger picture, if you have kind of the overview, the map view of what's happening, it helps us a lot understand why when someone says to you, trust your intuition, that's not a light recommendation. Like that, it should actually be a fundamental way of life, because that intuition is so precise for you that nothing in this world could ever give you better information than that if you learn to hear it and listen to it. And so as trite as that might sound, oh yeah, trust your intuition or go with your gut, it should really be a profound mechanism of living, because it will guide us in a way of perfection. And so as we go through this journey, we uncover all kinds of things. But the journey itself is fraught with a lot of experiences. And so we have to learn to navigate those as well. And so as we undergo this, what I sometimes term a multidimensional awakening, like awakening to understanding there are other aspects to life, energy, creation, reality, solar systems, galaxy, cosmos, you name it. As we go through this awakening process, we start to have experiences that can create a lot of confusion, disorientation. It can bring illnesses to the forefront. It can surface things that have to be kind of resolved or released. It can bring up emotions that are holding us back in temperament or in well-being. We're creating illnesses in ourselves. And so we're being given the gift of lots of understanding and wisdom, and also tools to work with the transformational energies. And so what they showed me in the visions that I was given around this DNA system is that there's a tool that I work with called the Unity Field Template. And it's a light pattern, and it can work within the structure of this DNA molecule to help calibrate energy or to shift and move energy around to help filter the integration that's trying to take place. And so that's just one example, but there are hundreds and thousands of these being given to humanity in different forms because we're being given what we need to implement grace, to bring in the grace of this transformation ultimately, even though these times are quite turbulent by nature. And so that's a far cry from where I started in my medical career, but it's kind of how it unfolded. A very long answer, Sam, but I feel compelled to kind of go into that depth with it with you because I think it's a really important message for people that we're sharing this opportunity with.
Oh, it's so powerful. I feel, on this journey myself, 30 years and personally being immersed just sort of randomly into the interweb and social sphere in the last 12 to 18 months out of nowhere. A lot of people are like, where have you been hiding? I don't know. I was given a mandate and a directive to merge into what I would never volunteer to want to merge into, quite frankly. It just happens to be part of the driving force of my teachers and where I'm being led to help contribute, as we are all contributing to raising that awareness within humanity and really returning back to the fundamentals, which is empathy. In my opinion, that's part of that true surge of awakening from a humanistic perspective, is realizing the power of that currency. And so everything you're saying, you had me at hello. I mean, it's like I could sit here for hours just listening to you because it resonates. And this is furthermore part of the the visceral, kinesthetic, somatic response that you have from your tuning fork. We call it, the barometer, the physical flesh is the very decoding of this messaging in a form that you can understand and accept. This currency of electromagnetism from the physicality is giving you the very crumbs to your Sherlock, to your Watson. And you can then find an elementary moment of realization that is validated through the experience. And, a Taoist path is always, if you're thinking, you're not knowing. If you're knowing, you are feeling. And now it's about accumulating, as you referenced, the Kundalini awakening, and then furthermore into inquiry. From a Taoist path, we have inquiry, then we have, contemplation that leads to curiosity that opens the doorway to hope. And from that hope, it blossoms into a belief system. That belief system is nurtured through the experience that then validates the knowing. And that would be the only thing that would be the present moment that makes it realized to be true to you. And furthermore, create from this material something that is repeatable and that you can share with others as that experience.
It's brilliant. It's so beautiful what you're saying. It's an incredible narrative of the whole expansion journey. And I remember when I first started having visions and I was seeing these things in my mind's eye, and I'm looking at them, and I'm thinking, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, what is that even? Like, how am I supposed to understand that? And what would happen is the experience would happen, kind of powerful, but I later came to realize that every single element of the image conveyed information. It was such a constellation of precisional information that the color, the position, the alignment, the absence of something, the way it shifted, the way it moved, every single thing in it conveyed information. And I was left to decode it. And that happens through contemplation. You kind of have to sit with the experience and contemplate it, and it keeps talking to you. It keeps revealing pieces of itself. And so as you kind of sit and listen, and I would have to start journaling and writing little notes about things I would realize, and eventually put it together in a more formal story. But it's a whole process of translation. And I realized it's when I came to realize so much of my work is messaging. It's about being a messenger, about being able to receive information that's not traditional, or people say galactic or this or that or the other thing, but information that's out of the realm of everyday consciousness, and presenting it in the verbiage, with sentences, with phrases, with diagrams, with pictures and explanations, so that we could linearize and conceptualize the symbol or the meaning of the image. But everything in that image was there in its purest form. It was just there. It wasn't, we didn't have to go through any of that linearity. It's just there if we could understand the code. But that was the work of making it human. That's the work of kind of bringing it down, if you will, or bringing it into a form that could be appreciated. And so it took me a while to realize that's the nature of things. Like, that's how it is and how it was happening. That was actually part of my own teaching, I guess, to get through that. And it's so funny because at every step along the way, I'm doing all of this and living all of this while I continue to practice medicine. So I'm living in this world where I'm, on one hand, I really felt split in two, almost like I'm living in this very 3D reality and doing my 3D work, at the same time having these experiences that I was propelled to share or bring to life in some way, either in meditation groups or by doing energy healing sessions with people and all these other things. But they were kind of like side by side. They were not, I wasn't understanding why, wherever they would come to meld or come together. And so as I went through this, the things that I was being exposed to on one side were becoming so much more outrageous in one way, that how to integrate them into a world where people who lived on the other side of my fence could still understand that I'm sane and okay and, a functioning part of 3D reality. And so there was a whole tightrope that had to be walked on that journey. And I had to keep breaking down my own fears, my own insecurities, my own sense of, judgment, my own sense of rejection, my own sense of all those things that are part of the story of every one of us, that you can see how it was kind of tailored. Again, it was tailor-made. Every little thing on it was perfect. And so as it moves forward, you see that we're all like a thread in the fabric. We're all kind of going through this process, living experiences that are changing the fundamental nature of reality and the fundamental nature of consciousness. And then you can start to really grasp how this bigger integration is taking place, how this ascension journey, if you will, is taking place, because humans are going through this. As one person goes through it, they become a support for at least 1, 2, 100, 1,000 other people going through the same experience. All of those people become a wave, and they affect the lives and experiences of 1,000 more each. And so there's an exponential growth. There's an exponential change in the nature of that transformation. And then on top of that, because this is a galactic process or a big scale process, what's happening in humanity is there are also children being born that carry a different kind of consciousness than what we might have recognized ourselves to be when we were young. And so, for example, I can remember, and it may be true for you too, where you might have been in environments where children were okay, tolerated, but they didn't have a lot to contribute, or what they might say was not that important. They were just there to play or do their thing. But the adults did one thing and the kids did one thing. It's not the nature of kids anymore. Kids have this sense of value. When you try to deteriorate the consciousness of a child today, there's a rebelliousness that happens in them immediately, because they know their worth. They understand we're all spiritual beings. They might not use this terminology or have that phraseology, but they have an inherent understanding of their worth. And the term I like to use is their divinity, the light in them. They have an awareness of this light in them. And so if you don't respect and honor them, they'll not respond well to you. And so we look at that as a rebelliousness, or the kids are, acting up, or they're entitled, or they're, all the crazy phrases that you hear people say. But really what the kids are representing is a different form of consciousness that will soon be the way all of humanity is. Like, as we keep going forward generation to generation, that will become an innate way of being. And so humanity is beginning to integrate this process through birth, as well as through personal transformation while in the body, if you will, or in form. So there's this whole big wave of change. And people will ask me sometimes, well, where's it going? Like, what's this leading us to? Like, is it just to have a better world, or, is it to evolve humanity in a different kind of a way? And the answer I usually give is something like this. Humanity is a divine construct. We are spiritual beings in the form of a body, and we are meant to be here discovering the nature of reality with joy, interrogation, bliss, wonder, and to learn to operate from a collective consciousness where we serve the good of the whole. And so the whole human experience is all about moving us towards that. Imagine a humanity that lives by those principles. Imagine a humanity where the government functions that way, where decisions are made about nature and the environment from that level of consciousness and understanding, where towns and cities are constructed based on those principles, where food is energized and developed with an understanding of the living consciousness that goes into the food. These are the kinds of things that become an integral part of that future. Now, that's not going to change until it changes in our thinking and in our consciousness, until it's the consciousness that we hold as a collective. So we're living through this time where all of those things are coming into consciousness. And that's what we call the awakening. We're starting to realize those things. 100 years ago, those words would have been so strange or foreign, people wouldn't even have understand what I said. But today, in an audience listening to us right now, everybody's going to understand those words. Everybody will get the principle of that and understand the truth of it or the reality of it. So as that filters in, then it has to work through the system. So that's how it creates, or it evokes, change from within. It creates a process where things change from an interior space. And so all the things are in place to support this. The resistance is there to prevent it. And we have ourselves in this little struggle. So we can consider it a struggle of light and dark, or a process of awakening, bringing more light, more consciousness, more understanding into the realm of being. And then that will create the transformation at hand. That will fundamentally change the nature of being human. It's going to become a very different world, a very different civilization. And that's the next step on the Earth's path forward. Now, that could open us up to a whole understanding of, well, why is this happening on Earth? And we have to go very galactic all of a sudden, because you realize that the Earth is part of a bigger system as well. There's more to reality than just the Earth. We're here on Earth as a planet and a civilization that's undergoing this transformation. But the Earth is part of a whole vast array of solar systems and, galactic energies and realities that are part of this bigger system of God. And that as we go through this awakening, the Earth is being propelled in its evolution in the ways that we're describing. But it's just one part of a much bigger system. We won't necessarily go into that unless you want to, but it's part of a bigger system of life and reality. And that the time is now for Earth to undergo this aspect of her transformation, and with humanity as part of that story. So.
That's so beautiful. I mean, it's very much a mandate and a directive for a Taoist path of self-realization. It comes from the lens of understanding the nature of reality. It's summarized in the simplicity that everything is a bellows. Everything is contracting and expanding at the same time. You're all things and nothing at the same time. So this creates contemplation and curiosity. Furthermore, through that curiosity and intrigue to decipher what that means, because your mind kind of gets blown, you start to look at the simplicity of what that is, and the center point of that, the Vesica, which within Taoism we call it the Wu Ji, which is access to the primordial mother, which is the unification of all things. And you find that within the evidence base of all energy potential, it has this center point. And so when you reveal it through the breath in and the breath out, when you hold that, there is what we call the absorption of the riches within Taoism, where you accumulate what we call the substance, which creates and forms this evidence of yang from yin, which will be hardened like a diamond, and that starts to present itself in a visceral, kinesthetic, somatic response from the physical body. And that hardness of that diamond we refer to as perfection manifest. And from that, you can blossom into this incredible realization that that harnessing of that very moment is that self-realization. And it comes in the form of what we call the method to the madness, which is the alchemy. This is the very method that gives you more and more self-evidence of this realization that all this electromagnetism is this dualistic currency, we call it, the currency which is created from your attention intention. And the more you form that, I sort of bring it down to a physics perspective. I mean, the oscillating vibratory effects you and I are having as we commune with this experience, we are both experiencing this as a now moment. It's there, it's physical, it's energetic, it's realized. We can, as I move my hands as we speak, we feel the rippling effects of that through this ether that is just potential. And so when someone realizes that, I sort of water it down to a physics model of light to wave to matter to particle, realize with your attention, intention, forming and cutting from the cloth of perfection, the primordial mother, revealing distortion, as my dear friend the monk would say, is distortion. It's energy. This is the currency that we operate on. This is a currency that is present within this material. And from that currency, you form evidence of energy potential. And that energy potential is offered to you vibratory, frequentially, and then ultimately the gain of that access, that Sherlock to your Watson, is the resonance and the ability to hold that as the Wu Ji that we call the primordial mother. And furthermore, the serendipitous, synchronistic expression of that is what we call Wu Wei, effortless action, effortless effort, the flow, baby.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. It's well, thank you for that, and thank you for the teaching, because it's such an incredible. I was going to say philosophy, but it isn't. It's wisdom. It's incarnate wisdom. That's the words are incarnate wisdom to everything you're sharing, and it's interesting for me because in the work I do I do monthly meditations with a group of light beings that are called the Sirian Blue White transmissions, and so these are meditations that are done by a group of people around the world, around the planet, and everyone has a theme. And the whole essence of last year's transmissions was development of the diamond light body. That was the actual language they used in conveying the teaching. So I was really blown away when you share from the depth of the philosophy and Taoism, how it mirrors exactly the process that's being conveyed in the same teaching. So it really touched me when you shared that.
Well, it is. It's so beautiful, the expression, right? I mean, my teacher, Lao Tzu, I commune with on a second-by-second basis, will always give me insight, and it would seem to someone on the outer fringe of reality, this human expression, that I potentially have some type of wisdom, which I have none. I'm as dumb as rocks. I happen to be a conduit to this information that would seem kind of like eloquent and blossoming with this essence of pure love, which comes from that. And it's not conceptual, it's not subjective. It is
a willing participant in the great cosmic drama, as they say.
Right. Yeah. And I love the way that you're merging with your wisdom teaching and the insight to what is proposed or contemplated for the future. Lao Tzu had a very similar insight. I'll just share it with you briefly, but most people came to him earlier this year, and he was, the question was, well, what about the death and destruction, financial ruin, World War III, all this kind of stuff? Mm-hmm. And he watered it down, and he can be quite cheeky. I mean, he works in frequency, he speaks in frequency. So, but he watered it down to the simplicity of this. Imagine you're like a grain of sand, asking the beach, what are we doing today? Fall back into the beach and be realized. And most people are like, holy moly. Because he finds that it's very funny, because that human condition, the boundary, the limitation, is the very struggle that everyone has with identifying that the emotions are another frequency of expression that can either be limited, or, as we put it within the bellows, you're either contracting or expanding. All this incredible wisdom teaching refers back to the simplicity of, is your glass half empty or full? And he shares with and I've spoken to quite a few scientists that read the Schumann resonance, and that comes out of Italy and Russia. There's data that gives you an idea of where is the status of frequency, which more commonly to most people would refer to a brainwave state. This frequency and what that transmits within this physical body, the divinity transmitted through this barometer. And, if you stand on planet Earth as it stands today, I think we're transmitting a frequency of about 7.83 without any interruption of external interference or your own mind perceiving it to be separate from the actual unification, which we call the Shen, the spirit. This unification is realized. And so that would be in line with sort of like an alpha theta state, which is a state of creativity and limitless possibilities, when you're able to harness that state, which people dip in and out of all the time. The contemplation of, meditation in of itself gives you the opportunity to enter into these states, which give you merging of that unified state and possibilities of creativity. Now, with further research and inquiry, there's this very foreign energy that is holding the resonance between a 12 to 18 hertz frequency. Now, that would present itself in mayhem, death, destruction, fear. This is a state that we would refer to from a brainwave state as a beta state. So beta brainwave state can be great to start your day, but it doesn't help if you have 5 cups of coffee and you've got emotional problems. You're going to see the world as it's on fire, and we're going to burn this bad boy down. And so then he goes into that, and I love the way it aligns with what your messaging is for your own realization. Is he then speaks on the merging of the primordial mother, which is the absorption of all colors, and the reflection of her presence of unification through the sun, which is the admission, the transmission of all colors. It then creates a frequency that is 9 times more powerful than ever before in human history, that is then penetrating and merging with planet Earth and revealing itself through that spectrum. And that spectrum is the frequency to 40 to 60 hertz over the next 12 to 24 months. Now, that to me sounds very similar to the messaging that you're sharing with the teachings that you have, which, again, I'm having the epiphany you had 5 minutes ago. It's like, you can't make this stuff up. It's like,
it's amazing, isn't it? It really is. I love that.
And so when he shares that, it's like, and there's no room, because the more you merge with it, the more you walk your path of self-realization, this will become the regular, station of humanity. And so you can't fight it. It's like you can't fight the feeling of being whole. And when you're whole and you're transmitting at a gamma brainwave, you are the creator, and you have no limitation, no boundary. You have complete imperium of that state. And what you can do with it is create whatever it is that you choose to. Now, of course, the evidence of that will come with the embodiment of selflessness and servitude. You'll know if you're there. Now, if you get distracted, and you go off in a few tangents and you get mesmerized by energy potential,
the baubles.
I want to do all these crazy things. There's nothing wrong with that, because that's part of the journey.
Yeah,
I would be a little bit more focused on continuing your path rather than getting distracted by the baubles, which a lot of my students will start with that. I want to levitate. I want to do all this crazy electromagnetic stuff where you heal people and you shock people with an electric charge. I mean, this is all part of the Taoist alchemy. It's exciting, but it's when it gets distracting and you pause your path to just be obsessed with the baubles, which doesn't make you whole. In definition, whole is healing. That's what healing is returning to that true nature of unification. So when I have students that get a little mesmerized, I help them adjust their energetic potential to realize that you know, oh my goodness, Jiffer, you say service, but I'm still excited about wanting to move this potential and heal people and manifest things, all this kind of stuff. I'm like, that's a lot of fun. Now, but understand this is a part of your self-realization and validating that this is true. The true nature of reality is evident in your experience that you can share with others and you can repeat it. But furthermore, you start to understand that you will realize the servitude and the selflessness. And they're like, well, selfless, what are you talking about? When you are in service to others, you are in service to yourself. They went, oh, sign me up. I'm in. And I'll just end with this. One of my teachers, Jade Emperor, uses a very clear evoking incantation, which is the simplicity of all things. A power abundant in its giving you will receive, unifying the body with the spirit with the energy, bringing heaven to earth, transcending all is one, one is all, revealing perfection manifest. That is your gift. That is your offering. That is your gift. That is your offering. That is your gift. That is your offering. And
it's amazing. The words are perfect. It's so, what you share is so profound, Sam, because I work a lot with healers. And as we go through this experience of having, some pretty interesting and incredible encounters with others as we help each other, on the path, there's distractions. And so you kind of see that you can be led to think this is my power, or this is, my value or my importance, or I'm trying to make this important. So you can kind of see all the little ego, what we call ego trappings along the path.
Ego, we call it ego.
Okay. And so as we go forward or higher, I guess, in vibration and consciousness and understanding, you realize you're merging with the mother. And it prompts me to share something with you I rarely say. In the structure of this DNA, at the very top, when I see the end of the channel, it's the Sri Yantra. That's the pattern, which is the representation of the Divine Mother. But there's a luminosity that comes through it. And this is the attainment. As we go through this awakening through the structure, we are merging in consciousness with that origin. And so it so beautifully correlates with what you're saying, because you realize it's a surrender to the force and letting that operate through us. And the more we're capable of doing that, the more power it holds, the more healing we can contain. But understanding it's not about us, in a very human sense or in an egoic sense. It's about presence. And the more we can surrender into that presence, the more we can surrender into that space, the greater good we do, the greater ability that we hold. And so you can see how the ego has to go through its little refinement, and we can't avoid those steps. Like all of us will have our own little bobbles, I guess, on our path as we journey. But as long as we stay true to the mission and stay true to the understanding, we'll be certainly guided and led on our way. So it's a really beautiful thing to share.
Well, yeah, and I think the alchemy really shows evidence of that, because for a Taoist, your the traits and the discerning and affirming and being able to crystallize what is a fleeting moment that becomes a permanence, that you have the ability to have insight. And so when you develop skills, I just put it under the blanket statement of sensory perception, but from that you can create, clairvoyance, mediumship, channeling, but it's repeatable. And the evidence is constant that, as you mentioned, the Akashic, we call it the source, the highest level of ascension for a Taoist is direct source channeling and having the information repeatable. And so, we start with the physical body, energetic body, spiritual body, sun body, earth body, moon body, oneness body, ultimate body, and then being with all things.
Okay.
And that ascended state then gives you incredible insight. So with my teachers, they are giving me a dialogue with the monologue that is the primordial mother, which is the direct source. So they are fascinated.
I love it. That's so beautiful. My heart is just singing. I love that.
Really so powerful. Our communion right now is merging that, and evidence of that charge that we're oscillating and dancing between is that unification and that realization. And furthermore, the audience, any of my students, they love this, and the audience loves these conversations because it's not just a passing of wisdom teaching that stays in a contemplated state of concept. It becomes realized through the experiential moment of now. And you cannot deny that. You will experience it. It will become visceral. And
it's a catalytic, it's a catalytic creation. It creates a power. That's really true. It's amazing.
Incredible. I'm not sure with our time frame. I think we might. How are you for time?
It's getting close. Yeah, so we probably should begin to wind down, but we'll have to have another conversation another day for sure.
I would
thoroughly enjoy this.
I love that, because it really does. It comes in my personal experience with our conversation today. You had me at hello, but you had me at hello before we even entered into this incredible experience today, because we're already experienced the resonance. It's quite clear. I certainly look at in this space right now. You and I have been on a similar biological journey of realization over the testament of the human timeline of many decades in this space. Now, the realization is that there is a whole new world order. 30 years ago, I'd have someone coming to me with potential psychotic episodes, being locked in a room in a padded cell. And then furthermore, through inquiry, we go through the process of exercising these energies on a very fundamental sort of mechanistic response as a Taoist priest. That happens to be one of the rituals. Now, furthermore, this is a contemplation and creative state that is brought on by the individual's experience. Be very clear, there are an infinite amount of energies and spirits in this world. Now, you get a fire sale on that, and I don't have to see any of it, because I'm looking at everything as the dance of yin and yang, and then finding the center point of the unification. Now, perceptual wise, you're going to have the individual seeker that will create a very fundamental relationship with these spirits and entities that form to shape their belief system, which will bring on what would be seen as good and evil, heaven and hell. These are all things that will transmute. But as you ascend, it becomes unified. There's no presence of that. And so today, you would come across someone who has a very similar experience, an awakening, and they realize they're channeling the Palladians, start a YouTube channel and find 100,000 followers listening to their very word. That wasn't what it was like 30 years ago. So it's a completely different new world order. And quite frankly, I have not had to contend with the potential of this low, what I would just call a low frequency, for 10 or 15 years at this point, because people are becoming more and more clear that it doesn't have to be bound by that, because the more you intention fixates on anything, you're a creator, and whatever it is you're creating. Now, it can be perceived as good and bad. That's not how a Taoist looks at it. It's just yin and yang. But if you are still developing and nurturing your own senses and your ability to see everything as one, you will perceive it as your belief system serves you. And if that belief system has not been validated, or your knowing has been corrupted by your lens of reality, then you're going to see things a little differently, and furthermore, invite something that could be problematic that doesn't have to be, in my opinion. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. It's precise. What you're saying is so true. But even that, as you'd mentioned, it becomes part of the experience, because everything, like we were talking earlier about the baubles, the little things that we find as a distraction on this journey of integration, different things will arise that are an energetic match to the construct being held. So if we need to see it to release it, we'll often create experiences to do that. And as long as we go full circle through the experience and out the other side, we'll integrate it and learn from it. And that will be part of our path and our transformation. And so we always have to be humble enough to kind of look at things and say yes and no, or I was right there, I was wrong there. I learned. Right and wrong is not precise, but it's to convey an understanding. It's a path where you kind of look at things and say, oh, this is what I thought, this is where it led me. Now I see differently. I'm going to go back on my path and reintegrate. So you kind of do a little loop and you come back and you continue forward, but you carry the wisdom. When we do Akashic integration, so much of it is like that. You can imagine if we've all lived, X number of lifetimes, say it's 100, 1,000, 10,000, whatever it happens to be, you've lived an enormous volume of human experience in that time. And not all of it has been fun or good. In fact, a lot of it may be very painful or very difficult or very challenging or very suppressive or oppressive in different ways. And so as you burn through the energy of that memory, as you kind of burn through the content of that in this integration, you can see that it creates a lot of potential distortions as we awaken. And so we have to be really, really humble, really kind, really present with ourselves, really present with each other, forgiving, all the attributes of a noble spirit. You kind of have to go through them, and you have to manifest them towards yourself in the process. So it's not to be afraid of that, but it's to understand the nature of those things. And therefore, as we encounter them, we can always come back through grace to the self-acceptance and the understanding it was really genuinely meant to bring in the first place. And as long as we keep doing that, we'll stay true. So,
I would absolutely agree with you 1,000,000%. And that's the journey of the seeker.
yeah.
To the seeker, to the knower, is this incredible journey through the mystery of the Sherlock Holmes lens of realization. Elementary, my dear Watson. That imagination is the portal to all things. I always ask people, it's like, okay, so you're a healer, you're a guru, you're a judge, you're a janitor, you're a light worker, a massage therapist. The question is, you're here. Now, what is it that you're looking for? Well, I want to find the reason to my existence, and furthermore obtain an enlightenment, because I'm feeling as though I've lost my way. And I always ask them, the first question is, how do you feel at the end of your day? Exhausted. Well, let's start with the fundamentals, because you're sacrificing the very essence of your constitution within your physical body with the fallacy, the false light version of reality, where you're tapping into your own essence, your own constitution. It is just unnecessary. Let's get that fundamental down so that you can realize that you can surge this. One of the very exciting parts of Taoist alchemy is immortalizing this physical flesh. And so when you reunite with that unification, you have imperium, you have dominion, you have mastery of the 50 trillion cells that is the potential of the flesh and blood. So then you can really get down with this exciting, almost like a sorcerer, or an ability to move within this energy. And the more imagination you have, the more potential you have to create from that. You want to be a creator. You want to contribute to that path, that life path for a Taoist. Ultimate ascension is to contribute to humanity, to help people return to that frequency. We are an ambassador to planet Earth, and furthermore, each planet within this cosmos is an expression of the mother, and each planet has its own version of our civilization that is merging also through their own self-realization, and that comes to that fundamental unification. And the more and more we contribute, the more and more we remember who we are, and we refer to that resonance, and that comes in the form of empathy, and then we live happily ever after. Well,
Beautifully said.
But it's such a pleasure, my dear friend. I'm really, really grateful that you were able to come in and spend time with me today, and it's been profound. Your wisdom teachings are mind-blowing to me, and I really look forward. I want to invite you back again. I'm going to tell the audience there'll be a part 2, so I really look forward to seeing you in the future, because we have just got started. I really feel like we've just scratched the surface here.
That's beautiful, and I echo that. I feel the same sense. So we are one, and I extend to my heart to the whole audience with a blessing of peace and healing and all good things. So that until the next time, that will hold everybody in the light of that mother's heart, because that's it's holding us these days.
And so in closing, I'm going to leave all your social sphere and interweb communications, and where people can find more of your wisdom teaching, and how to reach out to you and immerse themselves into this incredible knowledge, because from that it will become a knowing through the experience. And that's what you really share with the world, is an experience of this unified state. And my gorging of my heart and feeling that flush of blood, that nitric oxide, oxytocin experience, is this now moment. And I'm very grateful for you, my dear friend. I will ask you one last thing in closing. What is your definition of spiritual consciousness?
Of spiritual consciousness?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. A friend of mine, we went over this contemplation. He's a devout Catholic, and he's very much into the mystical, deeper nature of his religion. But we want to make sure that he makes it very clear, and I would agree, this hijacking of consciousness, and still within that is a separation. It's not having people return to their truth. So by encapsulating it with an extra little word in front of it, loads it to the contemplation of a unified state, from our opinion. But I would love to hear what you say.
Okay. To me, it's funny. It's not a phrase I've ever thought of in terms of those two words put together, although it makes a lot of sense to ask the question. But the way that I kind of understand it is, consciousness is, and we are emanations of spirit that are veiled from the memory of that understanding. And so as we go through this journey, we are remembering, we are reintegrating with the consciousness from which we all emanate as one collective life. And so that's how I would conceptualize the phrase. It's a process of returning to the light, returning to the heart of the mother, returning to the consciousness that governs creation in all of its manifest reality.
That is absolutely beautiful and perfect. And hundreds of podcasts later, I've never heard the same answer. And that is just,
I'm sure.
I love it. There is no right or wrong. There's a million ways up the mountain. And one of the things that a Taoist holds true to themselves is that the student is the teacher is the student forever.
Yeah.
The second you lose sight of that, your consciousness ends, in my opinion.
100%. Yeah.
I want to thank you, my dear friend, for us reuniting our friendship and our bond from many lives before this. And it's so evident in the experience. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. I look forward to coming back around and communing again in the future with more of this experience. And I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. I am your humble servant and seafood, Taoist Master San Qing, and I'll see you on the next one, guys.